the subtitle of this book is the journey from a broken soul to my soulmate. So this journey is not something that just started today. It's a journey that started a long time ago as a child, kind of growing up in a certain environment, being conditioned or having certain influences about love or relationships or even sex, and realizing that the way I was conditioned really is not the way things are supposed to be. It wasn't until I removed myself out of a certain environment and kind of placed myself in the presence of God till I started to realize the way I view relationships and sex and women was just totally unhealthy. Also, just going through relationships. I'm in and out of relationships.
What made you comfortable enough to write the book and expose some of your transparencies?
No, it wasn't easy at all. It was difficult, but it started as me just journaling my thoughts, and also I thought it probably would have been a blog.
Okay.
And when I first wrote it, it really had very little about me. I was trying to shelter that part, keep it away, but
Right.
So as I wrote, I just knew that like me telling my own story would probably be more helpful than me just giving advice. And it wasn't easy revealing certain parts of my life.
So your first devotion is Accept the Reject from Luke 9, verses 51 to 56. So from your experience, why is it so important for us to accept rejection, and what happens when we don't?
That devotion, it was inspired by the story in the Bible where Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and he was actually going to fulfill his destiny, where he was going to be crucified and buried and resurrected. And I think I drew this parallel between that and relationships, because on his way to Jerusalem, he experienced other rejections. Like he stopped in a village with a bunch of Samaritans, and he asked, could he stay there for the night, because it was a long journey. And they basically rejected him. They said, no, you couldn't stay, for the simple fact he was going to Passover and he was a Jew. And I think what I pulled from there, the principle I pulled from there is the way he handled that rejection. Also the way James and I believe Paul handled that rejection. If you read the scripture, it says that they asked Jesus or asked for them to pray so they can burn down the village. And Jesus rebuked that. But if you looked at the way Jesus handled that rejection, he simply prayed for those Samaritans and he moved on to another village. You see, sometimes us as individuals, when it comes to relationships, we allow like that feeling of rejection to develop into pain and depression and anger and even rage. And that will stop us from eventually reaching our destinies. Amen. Because we're so blinded by that pain and that rage, that rage from the rejection.
That's real good. So the next devotion is Pigs and Pearls, and that's taken from Matthew 7:6. So talk about why we need to be careful when choosing who we entertain, and also who we allow, in our close, intimate circles.
That devotion also comes from one of the scriptures where Jesus is speaking. His lesson was kind of straightforward. He was saying, don't cast your pearls to the pigs. The lesson is basically we have to take care of what we see as valuable. We can't when it comes to relationship, we can't take ourselves, things like our bodies, our minds, our spirits, and give it to those that are unworthy and expect them to treat us like kings and queens.
Oh, preach that.
So there's basically what that devotion is talking about is just how we have to do a better job at screening the people that we date, the people that we get into a relationship with.
Yes.
Like we really have to understand what it takes to make a healthy relationship, what to make a loving relationship, what to make a godly relationship, and we have to look for those qualities in other people. Sometimes we get attracted to maybe the thugs or maybe women that value the frivolous stuff in life, and we expect them to value us when at the end of the day we end up getting hurt when we put our heart and our emotions into that type of relationship.
Right. So give me a quick example of the screening.
Easiest thing about screening is just knowing what questions to ask. Just knowing and not being scared to ask those questions.
Right, right.
You know, we can't get into a relationship and it be all about us and we just pour everything out about ourselves and we never find out about the other person. And then, you know, weeks or months or years down the road, we realize we just casted our pearls to a swine because we never got to know this person. And they ended up trampling on it. A simple one would probably be about their spirituality. So that's a major one for me. I would like to know, not only do you believe in God, but do you follow God, or your level of commitment, your level of service. And, you know, not only ask those questions, but you also have to see that act out in a person's life.
Right.
So you're asking along with observing. You know,
That's good. But the next one we have is allow me to reintroduce myself, from Matthew 13, verses 53 to 58. So let's talk about that devotion.
Okay. That devotion was inspired by the story where Jesus went back to his hometown. When he went back to his hometown, he started teaching in the synagogues, and he started trying to heal the sick and things of that nature. And the people in his hometown started to question, like, where did this man get this from? Isn't this Mary's son? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Don't we know his brothers and his sisters? And see, those people, they could only see Jesus as the man that he was, or the child that he was, but they couldn't see him as the man that he had become. And that happens a lot with us when it comes to relationships, when we try to reinvent ourselves, to try to better ourselves and become different people. It's usually those people from our past that will try to point that out. They probably wouldn't ask questions like, isn't that the carpenter's son? But they might ask, isn't that the guy that was a womanizer? Isn't that the young lady that had a baby out of wedlock? You know, what they're trying to do is keep us in prison of our history. They're trying to keep us trapped on something that we used to be. And really the devotion is just encouraging people that you can't let that stop you.
Amen.
Yeah, you can't let people's view of you, or what they thought they knew of you, the expired information that they had of you,
information. I like that.
Yeah, to influence your destiny.
I like that. And that's where that whole self-condemnation comes from, too, because sometimes when people keep reminding you of who you used to be, you're trying to focus on moving forward, and it's like, and then in your mind, and then you start to continue to have those self-condemning thoughts of what you did, and it's like, you know what? God's not there anymore. You know, he's moved ahead. You've asked for forgiveness. You've repented. He's not there anymore. So it's very important, like to your point, is don't allow people to pull you back to that place.
There's going to be people that try to pull you back there. You know,
Yes, I've had that happen too when I started on the abstinence journey. You know, I had one guy tell me, well, you know, I know you used to, and I'm like, that's not who I am. So
that's
like,
not who I am anymore.
I don't answer to that. And I had to stand firm and end the call too, because I was like, oh no, we're not doing this. I'm not going back there. And her question is it wise to date multiple people at one time? And define your definition of date too while you're answering, because you know we all have different definitions of the word date.
See, that's a good question. I often have this conversation. I think it's really up to personal preference. My preference is to date one person at a time. You know, I only have a certain amount of time. I only have a certain amount of resources. I only have a certain amount of attention, and I need to give all of that to one woman. Because if it's spread through 2 or 3 women, like nobody's getting the full Adama. So I prefer to date one person at a time. If it doesn't work out, then we can go on to the next. And when you're dating multiple people, it's just a chance of someone getting hurt, someone feelings getting more involved than yours, and it could get messy. But I don't really think it's a wrong or right way. And it also depends on your goals. Like, you know, if you're in it to get married, if you're dating with that purpose, you need to date one person at a time.
I don't know how people do the multiple date, because how do you remember who's doing what, who said what? To me, that's just confusion. And God is not the author of confusion. So for me, I
stopped that a long time ago.
Let's go on to your next devotion. Guard your gift, and that's from Judges 16 verses 15 to 16. And tell us, why should we guard our gifts?
Okay. That devotion was inspired by the story of Samson and Delilah. If you read the scripture, you'll see that Samson, when he decided to open up his heart and share the source of his strength and his gift with Delilah, he was taken advantage of. He was betrayed. He was by somebody that he thought loved him. And I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why some of us stay single for so long, that fear of opening up our hearts and